Amanda Leitner, and welcome to Rochester Rising, where we amplify the stories of Rochester entrepreneurs. Welcome to podcast episode 249 of the podcast. So thank you so much for spending some time with us today to learn more about small business and the culture of entrepreneurship here in our community in Rochester, Minnesota. In all of our podcasts, we hope that you learn something today from entrepreneurs themselves that can help with your own journey. We release a podcast each Wednesday here at Rochester Rising. You can connect in with our podcast from our website at rochesterrising.org. We're also pretty much wherever you like to listen into your podcasts, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and we have a YouTube playlist on YouTube dedicated to our podcast. So you can really find it anywhere. So tune in wherever it works best for you. So Rochester Rising is a part of Collider. Collider is a Rochester-based nonprofit that activates, connects, and empowers early-stage entrepreneurs in this community. You can learn more about Collider and how our parent organization can help accelerate and assist your entrepreneurial journey at collider.mn. We'll have the link to Collider in our show notes as well to make it easy for you to connect in with the services there and learn more. So Rochester Rising as a podcast, it's a storytelling platform started 5 years ago in 2016 to tell stories of entrepreneurship that were taking place here in Rochester, Minnesota. We spend a lot of time really getting to know the entrepreneurs and really understand their journey, why they're building a business here, how they're building a business here, what challenges they're running into, and what keeps them here in the community. If you are a frequent listener, you know that we ran a crowdfunding campaign a few weeks ago to keep Rochester Rising going. So, as many of you also know, we did not reach our full goal. However, from a lot of conversations we had with you, a lot of people who reached out, and to those of you who did donate, we're so very grateful for all of that. And from all these conversations and from the clear need we saw here in the community, we decided that we have to keep this going in some manner. So it will not look like it looked before. We are going to transition this to seasons, really moving away from articles as well, and going all in the podcast. However, the podcast, there won't be a new one every week. We're going to move to a season format. So we're going to have a season. We're in the middle of it now, a fall season, probably something from September to the end of the year, the end of December. So that's what we're in now. Then we'll take a short break and be back for a spring season. And that's what we're going to do moving forward. Also in 2022, we're looking to start some live events, which we were going to do anyway, but some live storytelling events. So look for that to come out. So we thought this would be a really exciting way to elevate stories of small business in our community through live storytelling events. Look more for that moving forward. So as always, we'd love to grow what we're doing here. You saw the importance of what happens when things are not fully funded. So we will continue our funding efforts for Rochester Rising. We'd love to have your support, and we will have a way for you to do that here soon. So look for that. But we really, really appreciate all the support that the community showed us over the past couple months or couple weeks to keep this going in some manner. We're very, very grateful, those of you who stepped up to support these efforts. So we have a little bit of a lag in our new podcast with entrepreneurs, but we wanted to keep this going. So I'm actually going to share with you some audio from a webinar that took place last Friday, October 29th. Called Productivity Hacks Keep Organized in an Increasingly Disorganized World. So this was hosted on Crowdcast, which was a new platform to us by Collider's Executive Director, Jamie Sundsbak, and it was sponsored by Collider Foundation, which, as you remember, we are part of Collider Foundation. We are part of that organization. And this event was also sponsored by E1, or Entrepreneurs First. E1, if you're not familiar with it, it's a collaboration of about 20 organizations in Southeast Minnesota, 20 different entrepreneurial support organizations that really just come together to leverage their services and support for entrepreneurs. So we'll have a link to E1 in our show notes as well, so check it out there. I learned so much from this Productivity Hacks webinar. I hope you do as well. I will have a link to the YouTube video of that event as well. But this event was really about, managing this constant bombardment of stuff that really weighs us down and really impedes our ability to focus on what matters. And with a caveat, this is one productivity hack or productivity workflow that's talked about in this webinar, in this audio that we're going to share with you today, but it definitely needs to be tailored to each person's individual workflow and what works for you. But in this webinar today, Jamie talks about 3 broad tools he uses for organization, which is notes, email, and a really good to-do list application, which is really central to his way of managing productivity. He shares how he tries to keep things simple by, mingling to-do items from his personal life and work life for simplicity. He talks about notes, the importance of taking them, which a lot of people do not do, and storing them in some sort of way that you can search, and transferring those notes or making sure that you activate those notes as next steps and actionable items on your to-do list. He also talks about eliminating fail points in your system where you can drop the ball on a project or communications, how to practice inbox zero, and how to prioritize really just 3 big items a day to maximize your productivity and get things done. I know that might be really challenging and stressful to people to say, hey, we're only focusing on 3 things, but I've heard this over and over again from multiple different productivity gurus. Focus on 3 big items a day and just get them done. So this is a great conversation today. Stay tuned and hope that you can take something away that contributes to your own productivity while not letting a productivity tool run your life. So before we launch into today's podcast, just wanted to acknowledge our sponsor, Clifton Larson Allen, or CLA. The team at CLA would love to get to know you, learn about your vision, and see if they can help. CLA is a full-service CPA firm with over 100 offices nationally, including right here in Rochester. Sure, they do taxes and audits, but they also focus on helping startups refine their vision, build budgets, work with banks and investors, and track and organize their accounting. They are deeply experienced at building the business systems that allow you to focus on what you do best. Get product market fit, grow sales, hire talent, and create a thriving enterprise. Contact Todd Churchill at Todd Churchill at CLA Connect or give him a call at 507-280-2317 to learn more. All right, so we'll launch into today's podcast now with Jamie Sundsbak talking about productivity hacks, keeping organized in an increasingly disorganized world.
Well, as I said, you are here for productivity hacks. If you're here for something else, well, hang on, because I think there's some really cool stuff you're going to learn here today. So first off, I want to thank our sponsors. So Collider, the Collider Foundation, as well as E1, or Entrepreneurs First. Entrepreneurs First is a great, almost federation of about 20 different organizations here in Southeast Minnesota that are really focused on putting our entrepreneurs first. So these are great organizations that provide all sorts of services, connections, education, space for many of our co-working spaces that are part of the E1 network. So it's just a really great group to be able to surface, the resources that you need as an entrepreneur to succeed. So definitely check out their website and learn more about them. And Collider is proud and honored to be a member of the E1 network. So in case some of you don't know me, I'm Jamie Sundsbak. I'm the executive director of the Collider Foundation here in Rochester, Minnesota. I'm honored to serve all the entrepreneurs here in the Rochester area. We serve our entrepreneurs in 4 different ways. Ecosystem navigation, so working one-on-one with entrepreneurs to really understand what their problems are, and then how we overcome them. We have space. We have 2 co-working spaces in town. We have education and events to kind of fuel our entrepreneurs and our ecosystem. And then we do storytelling with our Rochester Rising platform. So I like to call this productivity hacks, or how I deal with life. So first of all, we want to ask, why do we even care about productivity, right? There's sort of some tasks, we just sort of do them. Well, productivity is the difference between this person, right, who's just kind of like laying there on their laptop. That's how I feel. I think, especially today in the modern world, we're constantly blasted with stimulus, right? People that want things from us, expect things from us. And it's not just in your work life, it's in your personal life. It's just a lot coming at you all at once. And then, fortunately or unfortunately, there's several ways that people can now reach you. So there are electronic means, there's social media, there's email, text messages, all of this stuff. It used to be, someone would either have to call you or actually physically talk to you, or maybe write you a letter and you get it in like 4 to 6 weeks. So that's changed. So we're just constantly bombarded with stuff, which can really affect our ability to really focus on what matters. So I'm here to tell you there is a way. There's a way through all of this. That's the silver lining. I would say the warning I have for you is every time I've sort of compared notes with very productive people, their schemes on organization and productivity are much different than mine. So I'm hoping through reviewing some of the items we're going to talk about today, that you just keep that in mind, that this may not fit with your particular workflow, and that's totally okay. But I'm hoping there are 2 or 3 things you can pull from this webinar to be able to integrate into your own practice. And I use that term very intentionally. I think as much as people have fitness practices or yoga practices or, all these sort of practices, I think being organized, being productive is really a very, you have to come to it through a lot of hard work, a lot of discipline. And so I just can't emphasize enough how you really, in order to make this work for you and really start to see the benefits, you're going to have to put it into place. So today we're going to cover my organizational workflow. We're going to go through kind of 3 broad tools that I use for organization that I really consider almost the holy trinity of organizational utilities. That's notes, email, and a good to-do list application. And then we're going to put it all together at the end to kind of show you what a typical day looks like for me. And hopefully for some of you that work with me in various roles, you'll understand a little bit more about how I do what I do. So through all of this is a very one-way thing for me. It's a little odd. I'm used to Windows with a lot of people kind of peering in, a lot of faces peering in on me. So in this webinar, obviously feel free to ask questions at any time. I want to make this as interactive as possible, and I will be monitoring the chat just for any responses. So I'm going to try to leave time at the end for questions, but we'll see how it goes. So in the beginning, I had a really strange first job. No, it was not doing complex surgeries, but it was working for Mayo Clinic, focused on doing a lot of genetic testing and then giving those results back to patients. And Mayo taught me very, very quickly that the disorganized mess I was as a junior and the senior in college had to change a lot, because now when we were working on projects, when we were diagnosing people, you had to really up your organization game. That was so critical, because now not only is there just a project falls through and that's okay, now this could be the difference between someone getting very pleasant news and very sad news. So I have just really continued, even though obviously my role doesn't involve patient care anymore, to think about how every decision I make, everything I do, I kind of trick myself and pretend that it's really tied to almost a life or death situation. And that allows me to continue to be more efficient and more productive even today. So for me, it all started with a book. I don't know if, let me know in the chat if you've read this book. It's called Getting Things Done by David Allen. I was given a copy of this book in the early 2000s. It's a good read. It's a really good way to start thinking about how you stay organized, how you stay productive. But when I read it, it felt very over the top. Like there was way too much information. And there was these crazy notions of once a week, you do this review on like a Sunday evening and you plan your whole week out. And more as I got into the entrepreneurial world, I realized that that's not realistic. I can't plan my whole weekend or week out. There's always going to be, massive issues that pop up that fires I need to fight, which is going to throw off this whole organization scheme. So what I did is I took, the 2 or 3 great tips from David Allen and tried to kind of modify them and make them my own. So the first is capture, ideas you may have, meetings, anything that you can capture. Find a tool to capture it instantly, and hopefully it's easy to review at some time. Review regularly. Like I said, David says to do it once a week. I do it once a day. I know that can kind of, for those of you that don't do a process like this, a daily review, that can seem overwhelming. It can be like, well, now I'm adding on extra time to my day. But I guarantee if you do it right, you'll actually end up cutting time off of your day somewhere else, and it should equal out. And I can tell you, it helps to lower your stress level rather severely. I think I probably have, when I'm in a flow state and I'm using this process, there's really no stress. It's just moving from one task to the other. And then most importantly with anything, execute on it. So I like to call it modified GTD. I don't say that a lot because, maybe David Allen's lawyers would get on my case, but it's really something I modified from his book. So I want to kind of take you through my morning routine. I dump everything into one big container. So I don't separate my personal life or my professional life. I put it all together because it just makes it easier to do. I do it in the morning. It really doesn't matter when you do it. Some people say the evenings work better for them. Totally makes sense. It's dependent on your circumstances. But I think the important part is it's in between, say, the previous day's work and then your next day's work. I think that's what's most important. And you want to take time to really, spend 30 minutes to an hour really reflecting on the day. We'll talk about the importance of inboxes, going through your inbox and really looking at all the stuff you've collected over that time and doing the appropriate action with them. And I'll also say, I know this seems weird, but try to do this 7 days a week. I can guarantee you on Saturdays and Sundays or any days that you have off, it's not going to take an hour to do this. It's only going to take 15 minutes or half an hour. But if you can integrate your personal life in there too, I found it really makes for a lot less stressful weekends with the family because I can get a lot of stuff out of the way, little small projects at home and things like that. That really kind of clear the way for just a great day with my family. So really the focus begins with what I call inboxes. So every application that I use has an inbox, this sort of central location where everything kind of flows into. So for instance, my notes application that I use has an inbox. Obviously your email has an inbox. And then my to-do system that I call, that's called Things, also has that inbox. And I think it's just important to get all of that stuff into one central location so you can sort and prioritize it. Speaking of the sorting and prioritizing, I basically perform 3 steps when I'm sorting or prioritizing any inbox. So I usually start at the bottom, oddly enough, and I do that especially in emails because a lot of email applications are structured from newest to oldest emails. I like to start with my oldest email because I feel like I owe that person a response or at least some attention. I hate when I'm constantly just cherry picking off the top because I don't think that's doing justice to the important stuff underneath. So the first question I ask every time I touch anything in this system is, can I act on it in under 2 minutes? If I can act on it in under 2 minutes, I might as well just do it right now. Get it off your plate. Don't worry about filing or archiving or whatever. Just get it done and move on to the next thing. If it's something complex, like a big project you have to do or something, you want to take time to brainstorm and break that really big task at the end up into simple, more manageable pieces, and then kind of look at the timeline that you have to accomplish that and sort of break it up into these manageable chunks that you can do just a little bit each day and move towards progress with your goal. Or if you, look in your email, for instance, and you see the newest Trader Joe's newsletter about cool stuff that you want to buy at Trader Joe's, take a look at it, archive it, and move on. So again, I think it's important to review to-dos every day. Again, morning or evening works best. So once I've reviewed everything in my inbox, the things that remain that I want to turn into actionable items or to-dos, now I'll talk briefly about the process of how I do that. So the first thing I do is check my calendar. Calendars don't factor in a huge amount with me. I know some people run their lives from their calendars, and that's totally okay. I've just not found that works very well because once something goes off kilter with my calendar, it seems to ruin the rest of my day. So I try to stay away from calendars. The only thing that go on my calendars are fixed items like meetings or very important events that I need. And then I kind of work around it the rest of the day with my to-do items. So first thing you should do is check your calendar. If you have a really heavy day full of meetings, you have to set those expectations with yourself that you're not going to get that much stuff done today. So maybe you only want to work on 1 or 2 items out of your to-do list, and that's perfectly fine. You're super busy with other stuff. The thing you don't want to do is say, I have all these meetings, plus I have 12 tasks to accomplish. I think you have to be real with yourself and honest with yourself that it's going to take a little bit of time to get all of this accomplished. And as long as you're meeting for the right reasons, I think that's okay, right? So what's the outcome of all of this? All the sorting, reviewing, assigning, to-dos. Really what you want to end up with is when you start your work for the day, you want a checklist for your day. You want to basically just have some sort of app or document that tells you, today I'm going to do all of this stuff, and I'm not going to focus on anything else, and I'm going to have a really good and productive day. So let's talk about notes. So it really doesn't matter how you take notes. I'm not here to tell you have to do it electronically or paper's the only way to go. Really, the most important thing is you take notes. I have a lot of meetings with a lot of individuals, and I would say almost 50% of the time, the person I'm meeting with does not take notes. And that makes me super nervous, not only because I'm a really, anal obsessive person, but I feel like it's going to, unless they have great recall and a photographic memory, it's just not going to stick with them. And I can already sense in a meeting if things are going to fall through the cracks with that person. So I just, and also I think it's courteous, right? You're meeting with someone, you have an agenda. I think it makes the other person feel, important, right? That someone's actually taking notes based on what they're saying. So I think it's super important to take notes. And then because we live in the era that we live, I think that all notes, whether they're paper notes or they're electronic notes, need to be stored in some sort of searchable library. So let's talk a little bit about note workflow. So obviously, in my workflow, you need three things for taking notes. First is an input tool. We have our paper notebook. We have an application like Evernote or a Notes app or Apple Notes or OneNote. It really doesn't matter. Something you're taking notes on could be a text document. It could be Microsoft Word. Doesn't really matter. Just have something that's consistent and that makes sense for you. The important thing that I think a lot of people skip is you should have access to a library of your notes. There's many benefits of having a library of your notes. The first is searchability. So, for instance, this week earlier, I was meeting someone who I thought I was meeting. I thought I was meeting them for the first time. I ended up going back in my Evernote and just throwing their name in just to see if I've ever met with them. And I found that actually April 15th of 2019, I had met with them. So I was able to go into the meeting asking questions about stuff that we had that previous meeting about. And I think I kind of, blew her mind. She was like, wow, you remember that? And I'm like, sure, I remember that. I just have a really good memory. Well, obviously it's because I store all my notes in a library. For those of you that choose to use paper notebooks, you're going to use your phone quite a bit to take a lot of photos. And so definitely think about that when you think about these workflows. The cool thing about modern note-taking applications like Evernote, like Microsoft's OneNote, a lot of them have really solid handwriting recognition built into them. So it used to be pretty difficult to do handwriting recognition, but Evernote does a pretty good job with it. And I think as AI and other technologies get better, not only will it just kind of try to recognize everyone's handwriting, but I think it will actually try to recognize your individual handwriting, which is really cool. So, these libraries, whether it's Evernote, OneNote, Apple Notes, most of them have a cost to them. So just be aware that it costs a little bit. But I think that tiny bit you're going to invest in one of these applications, note-taking applications, is going to pay off in the future. Plus, you have a great curated archive of everything you've done, which is really cool. The second thing would be to make sure that it's secure. So a lot of these more well-known applications have a lot of things like two-factor authentication and stuff like that. So just make sure whatever you're using has some level of security, and please don't put vital information into your library. So I don't want to see photos of your social security cards. I don't want to see, medical information. That stuff you should probably find a different solution for. Just keep your notes and things that you've written in your library. And then the output of all of this is when you're taking notes, you're listing down next steps and things that you have to do. You want to make sure that anything you list as a next step or a to-do from a meeting goes into your to-do app. And we'll talk about a to-do app here in a second. The important goal is to turn, those notes into to-dos that have actionable steps. And as the great salesperson Ron Popeil says, set it and forget it. So let's do a quick demo on notes, and I'll prove. We will stop sharing here for a sec. We will flip over to Evernote, which is my preferred application of choice. So we're going to mimic a typical day for me. This would be me in my morning review session. And I've collected a bunch of stuff from the day before. Typically, it's pages and pages and pages, but we're kind of simulating it here just to make it more manageable. Now, you can see that in this inbox, there's things I've read that I just want to keep and store or review for later. It's a mixing of my personal life. You're seeing a great recipe I found for Instant Pot chicken noodle soup. But you're also seeing a couple meetings, maybe a meeting with Bob Smith, who's an entrepreneur in town, or a creative meeting for maybe setting up a event or something like that. And then one thing I did keep from yesterday is I was in a meeting with Shannon Harris, who I know is in this course right now, and she mentioned that Victor Huang, who I know, and who is a really, really cool person, has a website. I didn't even know he had a website. So I definitely bookmarked that and wanted to review it later. So I'll just take you through sort of a typical scenario for me of how I go through my notes. So start at the bottom. And, Victor, it probably takes me about a minute and a half to read his site. And then I'm just going to grab it and archive it. So it's done. Like it's searchable if I ever need it again. I've digested the information I need. Now I can move on. Here's a meeting that I had. So I divide my meetings into 3 sections, and I've always done this with my notebook. So I have thoughts, or you can think of it as agenda. Before I start any meeting, I actually want to know, what's the minimal viable outcome from the meeting? So I actually write that typically under this section. So I remind myself at the meeting that what does success look like for this meeting? It's that particular thing. If I don't do that, I don't consider the meeting a success. Notes, obviously, there's a proposal that's, these people are on board, it's funding secure. But while I'm in the meeting, if there's anything that I need to do personally, I'm actually listing them under this to-do section so that I can later on take these, copy them, and paste them in my to-do application. Some of these, you can look at right off the top and say, okay, a proposal for a creative meeting. This is a multi-step process if I'm going to create a proposal. So I'm going to break those up into, easily attainable chunks. And then I'm going to assign them different dates and time. And then there's a goal for a slide presentation on the 24th. Same sort of thing. So once that's all in my system, again, archive, move on. Here's a meeting with Bob Smith, who's an entrepreneur in town. And I have to connect him with 3 different people. That was the outcome of the meeting. And I want to send him a summary of Slider. Collider. Wow, it's one of those days. It's Friday, everyone. So I'll go into my to-do app. I'll put these in there. And then something that I also do is I have these templates. So at Collider, we want to collect data about the people we're helping. So I always used to have to flip between different applications and stuff, but I just started making some embedded links to applications so that I can say, okay, I helped this person by introducing them to 3 great people in our community, and I also sent them a summary of Collider. So I can go in and just click, and that will bring me to the right database to deposit that information. Let's see, Laura has a question, why we're putting these in archive. I do that, and you'll see that with everything I do, because at the end, I want what's known as inbox 0 across all of my inboxes. I don't want to see a lot of clutter, because I think sometimes clutter that you visually see becomes clutter in your brain. So I've found that by clearing my inboxes and just moving them to something called archive, it seems to, at least for my mind, declutter my brain a little and know that only what's there is what's important at that particular time, I guess would be my answer. Quickly for this, because I want to do that, these I use tags, and we're not going to talk about tags a whole lot, but I have a kind of a little, this is an inside peek into my life. I have a little, basically something I call food book, which is just interesting recipes that I find online. So I want to tag that because it's just easier to search, and then we archive that. Oops, I archived the wrong thing. Well, you get the idea. So at the end, you've got something very clean. You're done with your notes. You've translated everything you need into actionable to-dos, or you've archived it and it's gone. Again, it's always searchable, but it's off your plate. And what you see is this nice, clean 0 notes, which I love. All right. So that was a demo of notes. Now I'm going to briefly talk about email. I think we all know how email works, so I'm not going to go into that, obviously. This is just a bit of advice. Again, your system is your own, but don't try to run your life from your email inbox. I know a lot of people, past associates I work with, just have their inbox and it's just full of stuff, and it's everything. It's their container for everything. And I just find that people can justify it. It makes sense to them, but for me, it doesn't make any sense. I think it adds to that sort of mental cruft in your brain if you see just everything mushed together. But at the same time, I think you do tend to miss some things from time to time. I've seen numerous people, tell me they've never opened an email, and because I have some crafty email tracking software, I can see they did. But I think it's not anything malicious. It's not. They simply just looked at it and then it got lost in that nest, and they weren't able to respond. So if you're going to be the productivity guru, I know you all can be. Try to eliminate these fail points, these things that could happen where you actually drop the ball on a project or drop the ball on a response or an email chain. You can't control everybody else, but you can control your own actions. So again, practice inbox zero. You want to try to practice that inbox zero, that every time you're reviewing or looking, especially in email, you're clearing out everything so that when you're out of that application, you have 0 emails in your inbox. And I do this in what I call harvesting my email. So again, much like we do in inboxes for notes or to-dos, you look at your options. So the first option here is respond. Again, if you can respond to something within 2 to 3 minutes, just go ahead and do it, and it's gone. Make sure to archive that email. Gmail has a great feature that you can enable called Send and Archive. If you do that, by hitting send, everything's going to be archived right away. You're not going to have to take that additional step to archive. Anything in your email that can be turned into a to-do item, you want to make sure to capture that in your to-do application. Some to-do applications will provide you with like a secret email address that you can just forward your email into your to-do application. That's a perfectly good way to do it. I find that I like to boil down that email so I don't have to read it twice. And if I know there's 2 things I've got to do out of that email, I would rather just go into my to-do app and write those 2 things down. And then on my next review cycle, turn them into actionable steps that I can accomplish. Again, you might get a Trader Joe's email, read it, have fun, archive it, get it out of there. Now, the dangerous one is defer or snooze. So I love deferring and snoozing emails. That's kind of my thing. I don't want to see an inbox full of stuff. And so if there's something that's just going to take a little bit more thought and a little bit more time, I'm going to snooze it. In Gmail, Outlook, most of the major email platforms will allow you to do this. I have a personal rule, though, that once I defer an email, that I can't defer it again. And that's just a personal way, because you can keep kicking that can down the road, infinitely. I once had an email that was my LLC registration, or re-upping my registration with the state of Minnesota. And they send them in the fall, like they're super nice about it. And for some reason, I just kept telling myself, I'll do that tomorrow. I'll do that tomorrow. And all of a sudden it was December 15th. And I was like, wow, I really need to do that. So try to set up some hard and fast rule that if you're snoozing something, it's probably that next time it pops up in your email box, try to do something with it. So I just want to prove to you that my email box has nothing in it. This was a screenshot I took right before we came on here. And you can see that, again, like in Evernote for my note-taking, this is what I want to see when I'm done. Some people have rules and ideas of how frequently they should check emails. I personally could not care less how frequently you check emails. I think the important thing is when you enter into a session of checking your emails, you're using this process so that when you close your email, this is what your inbox looks like. I think that's the most important thing. If you're ever on a mobile device, sometimes you can't quickly, do a to-do action or something like that. That's where that snooze or defer comes in handy, where you can just say, okay, I'll be back in the office in an hour. I'll deal with it then. So the heart of everything is this to-do list software. I cannot emphasize enough. I've tried to do this on paper. I spent 5 years of my life with notebooks trying to do all this. And it was just a lot of ledger transferring. It was like, oh, I didn't do that today. I got to move it over here. I've used colorful tabs. I've used, you name it, I've probably tried it. It was only after modern sort of cloud-based to-do list software appeared that I kind of found my holy grail and really kicked it into the next gear for me for organization. So it's worth kind of stopping here and talking about some of the to-do list applications that are out there. Again, your mileage will vary. You have to find one that really resonates with you. Some of them are free, all the way up to, I would say, $100 or $200 to buy this software application. More and more, as with we're seeing most of the things and services in our life, it's going to a monthly fee model. I'm not a big fan of that if I can get away with it. I would prefer just to pay once, but I understand Evernote went to that model, so I'm paying a monthly fee for Evernote. But my chosen to-do application of choice is something called Things. It's available only on the Mac. So sorry, Linux users or PC users, you won't be able to use Things. OmniFocus is another really good one. That's the one I started out with initially. It just got there was too many features in it, and I just ended up playing around with features all day, which is just not helpful. Google Keep, Microsoft To-Do, Todoist, Apple Reminders, these are all great things. And I just encourage you to try some of them, to really play with them and see what works for you and your workflow. Most importantly, make sure it has the capability to do recurring to-dos. A lot of the stuff that you do, if you do something more than 3 times a week, make it a recurring to-do. So just have it pop up at the right times to remind you to do those things. And the biggest need that I see is the ability to quickly enter anything at any time in the app. And so the sort of means test that I use for this is, can I drive in my car, have a random idea, and get it into my to-do list with just my voice? So if I could do that, I can pretty much enter in these ideas or notes to myself, from anywhere. I still haven't figured out the shower one yet, so if anybody has a good idea for that, please let me know. That's the one that still I get great ideas. They always say you get great ideas in the shower. I get a lot of great ideas in the shower, but I kind of have to hold on to them until I get out of the shower. So let me quickly show you an example of to-dos, and I will be using Things, which is my absolute favorite. It is my constant companion and friend. Okay, so the first thing I want to tell you is, don't look at this and get overwhelmed. This is when you achieve your black belt in project organization. This will all maybe make sense to you. So don't worry about that. What we should really worry about is this area. So again, thinking in inboxes, here's some stuff I've, pretend this again as a morning review. And these are the things in my inbox. So recently I've taken a week-long trip to Utah. We ate a lot of, great food, but it was kind of, not good for us. So I want to make sure that we create a great family dinner this weekend that we can really enjoy. And what I typically do is I know that a family dinner, any sort of multi-step action that leads to an outcome that I haven't thought through quite yet and thought of all the steps, I'll just put a little note here to brainstorm it. So that just reminds me when I get to this inbox to say, okay, I've got to think of some steps to create the ultimate family dinner this weekend. And then this is a one-off. I remember I said, if you could do it in 2 minutes, just do it. So Jane, the entrepreneur in town, she wanted me to check in on something she's doing. So I can quickly now fire up my email and send an email off to her. And instead of going through this whole process, I can just simply click it and it's done. And yay for us. So I'm using this productivity hacks folder. So I'm going to take this family dinner and I'm going to drag it into something I've kind of pre-populated, which is family dinner. And for the sake of time, because I didn't want to run out, this is where you would brainstorm all the steps. And you don't have to think of the steps in order. You just think of the different pieces. And I've tried to simplify it with a concept that you all know, which is sort of planning and executing on a dinner plan. You can use this for any sort of project in your work life or your personal life. So I want to identify that I want my dinner to be served. I want to have this on Sunday. So I'm going to go and I'm going to tag Sunday. And then I have specific tags to tell me how important is this that it gets done that day. So obviously this is the desired outcome. So you're going to want to say, oh, of course, it's due today. Obviously, if I don't make dinner for my family, there's going to be a lot of repercussions. Trust me, there's going to be a lot of repercussions. Get groceries. It's Friday. Maybe I have a great presentation with you all today. So I'm like, you know what? I'm going to take an hour off today and I'm going to go get groceries. So that's due today. And you can kind of go through all of these and just organize them into sort of, I was just reading Ahmed's comment. Yeah, you kind of are an audience plant, though, I think. But thank you for being the best audience plant possible. So you would go through and list out all of this stuff. And then what you're going to see is when it's all done, only the to-dos that are necessary and relevant for you today are going to show up in your today. So if you go up to today, here's all the things that I need to do today. And you can see a list of all. So this is a list of all. And sometimes that all can cause a lot of anxiety. It's like, oh my gosh, it's 12:42 on a Friday. Like, how am I going to get all this stuff done? And I class them by 3 different tags. So things I can do quickly in the morning. A lot of these are recurring events. For many of you, maybe who don't know, I run a co-working space. So there's certain things you have to do in the co-working space every day to make sure it works and it's functional for everyone. There's some things like reviewing my inboxes that I remind myself to do. So if you look at just classifying what do I have to do this morning? Here are a bunch of tasks that I have to do. I've done most of these already. I wanted to leave them in here for the purposes of this example. And then every day we try to put out one social media piece in Collider. So when that's done, I can simply click it. And now it's done. Then we have what's due today. So these are the things that I absolutely want you to do. These are the things you've determined yourself that are the most important things you want to do today. Doesn't matter when you do them. That's up to you. The important thing is it gets done that day. And then what I like to do is give myself a couple of could do's. So these are things, if I can get through my get groceries, I did my final check on my presentation before I start. Obviously, I'm in the middle of giving my presentation. I've got some work for myself this afternoon. Once I do that, let's say I do all of these, then I like to jump into what I call the bonus round. So it's partially gamifying your day. But these are the things, or at least one thing, that I could do. It's not vitally necessary to do. It might be vitally necessary to do on Monday in the case of this particular item for getting meetings on the books with my board members. Right now, it's just a nice to do if you have time. And I guarantee you, if you can click all this off your list, you'll have made those sort of actionable steps moving forward on bigger projects. You'll be able to keep your personal life in balance, and then you'll be able to continually move forward with a lot of projects. So putting it all together. So this is an example of my typical weekday. Pretty much at 7:30, I go into that review process. So I take every note from my notes inbox, my email inbox, or my to-do inbox, and I go through them. If anything needs stepping out into these actionable steps, I do that. I review my email. In many cases, I respond to a lot of my email, and I organize everything so that I can have that set it and forget it day. So that once I'm done with that process, I know here's the checklist that I need for today with things to get started. I always try to tackle a major thing first because it makes me feel good. If I can really get the ball rolling each day with some big thing that I have to get done, I think that's super important. And you can see, in between that, I might duck in and check email really fast. Maybe there's a meeting from this time. And then there's, of course, lunch because you've got to look after your own health as well. Another email, some meetings, and then maybe I can tackle a couple of other big to-dos in like this big 2-hour time crunch, followed by just peeking in on email again. I try not to look at email while I'm actively working on a project. It just sidelines everything. And then maybe at the end of the day, I've got an hour left and I'm like, man, I got all of these done. That's quite an accomplishment today. And now I'm going to do a couple of these minor to-dos just to kind of that cherry on top of what you're doing for the day. That's pretty much a typical day for me. Now, what you don't see is a checklist of 500 items I need to do. Those have all been properly filed, time boxed. They'll show up when the time is right. But right now, this is what you need to do. And please don't overstretch yourself. I've found that I can only focus on 3 big projects per day, and you just have to be okay with that. I know sometimes it feels like everything needs to be done. And trust me, you're going to have those days where you have to go way beyond this and do all of these projects. But I've also found that if you're getting slammed with that much work all the time, you either ask for a raise or you probably need to look for another job because the dictates of what people expect of you is just not going to be good ultimately for your health. Or your productivity in your job. So something that as you start to do a practice of reviewing, to-do inboxing, getting things into to-do lists, having your set it and forget it list, you can sort of start to feel like the software controls you. And that's not what we're trying to do here. This is a tool that you can use for yourself to be more productive and to increase the productivity of, the people that you work around. It doesn't control you. I spent about 2 years when I was working at a previous job at Mayo, really focusing on my to-do list telling me what to do. It felt like my to-do list was my boss every day. And I would get visibly upset and in many cases, like almost have a breakdown because I didn't check all my boxes for the day. And that's really sad if you think about it. That's an overreach of technology. You want this thing to be a tool that you can use, but it does not control you. So I just want to say that if any of you get really inspired by this and you want to dive into this world and you're going to become the best productivity guru you can be, you have to realize that this does not control you. You control it. So you have to be okay. If you have those 3 items that you're going to do for the day and you only get 1 done because life happened, that's okay. And you'll find a way to rebalance the next day and everything's going to be fine. You've got to be able to tell yourself that and then, of course, rebalance it so that you can get that stuff done over the next day. So that's basically the intro to how my madness works. Feel free to contact me at jamie@collider.mn. I want to put in a plug for our next event that E1 has graciously sponsored, which is Top 7 Tech Tips for New Entrepreneurs, which is November 12th at 12 o'clock. And hopefully it's same crowdcast. I think this worked actually pretty well. So we'll continue to use this for the foreseeable future. Thanks so much for your time, and I will answer any questions I can here in the next 10 minutes.
All right. Thanks so much for staying with us to the end here. I definitely learned something from this webinar. I learned something again from listening to it again while I was doing the editing. I hope you all took something away that you can apply to your system while not letting the system run your life. I think that's the most important thing here. If you know somebody who would benefit from this conversation today, we encourage you to share this podcast with them and spread this information within our entrepreneurial ecosystem. All right, that is a wrap for us on the Rochester Rising podcast today. Thank you so much for choosing to spend some of your day with us. If you enjoyed the conversation today, please make sure that you are subscribed wherever you're listening in before you leave, before you tune out for today. And if you really like the podcast, we would greatly, greatly appreciate it if you rated this podcast so that others can find it and hear these stories about entrepreneurship and small business development coming out of Rochester, Minnesota. We'll be here next Wednesday with a new podcast for you.